I'm Madison Hayes, 32, and until last month, I was the Chief Strategy Officer at Hayes Strategic Marketing, the company my father David built from nothing. For 10 years after college, I poured everything into growing our family business, while my younger sister Ashley barely showed interest. Then came the family dinner, where Dad announced his succession plan. Ashley would receive 100% ownership of the company I helped build into a $15 million enterprise. I walked out, resigned the next day, and never looked back. Before I tell you what happened when Dad called me begging for help, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe if you've ever been undervalued by family. Hayes. Strategic marketing wasn't just a company to me, it was practically a sibling that grew alongside us. Dad founded it in 1992, the year I turned 4. Some kids had bedtime stories about princesses. I had tales of client pitches and marketing campaigns that my father would share at the dinner table, his eyes gleaming with passion. Our home office became the first headquarters, and I remember falling asleep to the sound of the fax machine and my parents' hushed strategic discussions. By the time I was in high school, the business had grown enough to occupy a small office space downtown with 5 employees. I spent summers filing papers, answering phones, and absorbing everything I could about the industry. It wasn't even a question in my mind. I knew marketing was in my blood. When college application time came around, I specifically chose Northwestern for their stellar business program, eventually earning my MBA with a specialization in digital marketing strategies. Ashley, on the other hand, was different from the start. 4 years younger than me, she pursued a liberal arts degree in comparative literature at a small private college. During her summers, she backpacked through Europe or took internships at art galleries. Nothing wrong with that, we just had different passions. At family gatherings, she'd roll her eyes whenever business talk came up, calling it boring shop talk. I never held it against her. Not everyone wants to follow in their parents' footsteps. After graduate school, I joined Hayes Strategic Marketing officially. Dad made it clear I would receive no special treatment as his daughter. I started as a junior account coordinator, earning $38,000 a year, the same as any other new hire with similar qualifications. I shared a cramped office with 2 other junior staff members and earned my promotions through demonstrable results, not nepotism. Within 3 years, I had worked my way up to account manager, then director of client services by year 5. By the time I turned 30, Dad named me Chief Strategy Officer, overseeing all major client relationships and the strategic direction for the company. Under my leadership, we shifted focus to high-end B2B clients, developing specialized marketing approaches for industries requiring technical expertise. The crown jewel in our client portfolio was Sterling Commerce, a commercial real estate development firm that had been with us for 15 years. What started as a small project grew into an $8 million annual contract that accounted for over half our company revenue. Mark Sterling, the founder and CEO, was notoriously difficult to please, but we had built such a strong relationship that he referred to me as his marketing therapist. The Sterling account was largely my doing. I had personally pitched and landed their international expansion campaign that tripled the contract value. Our company signature became our proprietary strategic alignment process, a methodology I developed during my MBA research and refined over years of client work. This process helped clients align their marketing efforts with core business objectives in measurable ways. It was this methodology that transformed Hayes Strategic Marketing from a respectable local agency into a regional powerhouse, growing our annual revenue from $3 million to $15 million over the decade I worked there. Throughout those years, Ashley occasionally showed interest in the business, especially after it became successful. She would drop by the office when she was between jobs, asking casual questions about what we did. Dad always lit up during these visits, eagerly explaining everything to her while I continued working on actual client deliverables. I noticed these patterns but dismissed them as harmless family dynamics. Our parents, David and Susan Hayes, were traditional in many ways. They frequently discussed the importance of keeping the business in the family and creating a legacy. I assumed this meant they saw me as the natural successor, since I had dedicated my education and career to the company's growth. Ashley had cycled through 4 different career paths, teaching gallery administration, freelance writing, and most recently social media consulting for small local businesses. What I failed to recognize was how my parents' traditional values extended to more outdated notions of family hierarchy. Despite changing times, they held on to the belief that family businesses should ultimately be passed to the eldest male heir, or in our case with no brothers, to the daughter who might marry and continue the family name. Ashley had recently become engaged to Derek Prescott, son of a prominent local family, while I remained single, focused on my career. This background is important to understand why what happened next felt like not just a professional betrayal, but a deeply personal one that challenged everything I thought I knew about my family's values. The evening started normally enough. Mom had invited us for Sunday dinner, something we did monthly as a family. She'd prepared her famous pot roast, and Dad had opened a bottle of expensive Cabernet, a sign I now realized that they were marking a special occasion. Ashley arrived with her fiancé Derek, and there was an unusual energy in their demeanor. In retrospect, the signs were there. The exchanged glances, Mom's slightly nervous laughter, Dad's ceremonial tone as he asked us to all sit down after dinner for an important family discussion. We gathered in the living room, coffee and dessert in hand. Dad cleared his throat and began talking about legacy, the importance of family, and how proud he was of what Hayes Strategic Marketing had become. I smiled, assuming this was leading to an announcement about my future leadership. After all, I'd been effectively running daily operations for the past 2 years while Dad had semi-retired. "As you know," he said, swirling his snifter of brandy, "I've been thinking about succession planning. I'm not getting any younger, and it's time to formalize the future of the company." Mom nodded encouragingly as he continued. "After careful consideration and many discussions, Susan and I have decided that the best path forward is to transfer full ownership of Hayes Strategic Marketing to Ashley." The words hung in the air for a moment before I could process them. Ashley, who had never worked a day at the company, was being given 100% ownership of the business I had helped build for a decade. "Ashley has shown great interest in continuing the family legacy," Dad continued as I sat frozen in place. "With her fresh perspective and Derek's business background, we believe they'll take the company in exciting new directions." Ashley beamed, not seeming to notice or perhaps not caring about my shock. "I've got so many ideas for refreshing the company image," she gushed. "The current branding is getting a bit stale, and I think we need to pivot toward more lifestyle-oriented clients." The stale branding she referred to was a comprehensive identity system I had developed 2 years ago that had won 3 industry awards. "Of course, Madison," Dad added as if offering a generous concession, "we want you to continue in your role. Your experience is valuable, and you can help mentor Ashley as she learns the business." I would be mentoring my sister as my new boss. My sister who couldn't tell the difference between a marketing plan and a media kit. After dinner, I asked my parents to speak privately in Dad's home office walls, adorned with company awards my work had earned. I asked the obvious question, "Why?" "Honey, you're already so successful," Mom said soothingly. "Ashley needs this opportunity to grow. You've always been the capable one." "I'm capable because I've worked incredibly hard," I responded, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I've dedicated my entire adult life to growing this company." Dad leaned back in his chair. "And we appreciate that, Madison. You've done an excellent job. But that was your job, what we paid you to do. Ashley needs this chance to establish herself." The words stung like a physical slap. 10 years of 60-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, postponed vacations, all reduced to just doing your job. Meanwhile, Ashley was being rewarded for what exactly? Needing an opportunity. I tried reasoning with them about the business implications. "Sterling Commerce works with us specifically because of the relationship I've built with Mark. Most of our major clients deal directly with me. Clients work with the company, not individuals," Dad dismissed, waving his hand. "They'll adjust." It became clear that no logical argument would sway them. This wasn't a business decision but a familial one that revealed how they truly viewed my contributions. I was the reliable workhorse expected to continue laboring while my sister enjoyed the fruits of my labor. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, alternating between tears of hurt and flashes of anger. By morning, I had made my decision. I would not stay to train my inexperienced sister to run the company that should have been mine. I would not continue pouring my soul into building something I would never have a stake in. For the first time in my adult life, I chose myself over family expectations. I drafted my resignation letter at 4:00 a.m., printed it at a 24-hour coffee shop, and had it on my father's desk by 7:30 the next morning. The resignation letter was 2 pages long, professional, unemotional, and effective immediately. I outlined a transition plan for my current projects and included a USB drive with all relevant files and contact information. I didn't mention the real reason for leaving. Anyone who knew the situation would understand, and for everyone else it wasn't necessary to air family laundry. My father called within an hour of receiving it. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that cycled through shock, anger, and finally a terse request to not do anything hasty. I texted back a single line, "My decision is final." I had one major obligation: I wouldn't shirk a scheduled strategy meeting with Sterling Commerce that afternoon. Mark Sterling had specifically requested my presence to discuss their upcoming fiscal year marketing plan. I arrived at the office and conducted the 2-hour meeting with complete professionalism, not letting on that anything had changed. Mark seemed pleased with the direction we outlined, shaking my hand warmly as he left. "Madison, I've worked with a lot of marketing people over the years," he said at the door. "None of them understand our business the way you do. That's why I trust Hayes Strategic." Those words felt like both validation and a twist of the knife. I smiled and thanked him, knowing it was likely the last client meeting I would ever conduct for the family business. Back at my office, I began clearing out my personal belongings. Word had spread quickly, and the atmosphere was tense. Kevin Grant, our marketing director and my right-hand person for 5 years, stood in my doorway looking shell-shocked. "This is about Ashley getting ownership, isn't it?" he asked quietly. I maintained my professional demeanor. "I'm pursuing other opportunities." I replied the standard corporate non-answer. Kevin wasn't having it. "Madison, we've worked together too long for that BS. Half the clients we have came on board because of your reputation. Sterling specifically asks for you by name." Jessica Chen, our most senior account executive, joined him at the doorway. "Is there anything we can do to change your mind?" The team is concerned. "I've made my decision," I said, softening a bit. "You're both exceptional at what you do. The company is lucky to have you." As I packed my awards and photographs, Brian Miller, our creative director, dropped by with a more pragmatic warning. "Ashley's already talking about a complete rebrand and shifting away from B2B. She doesn't understand that our technical expertise is what distinguishes us from every other agency in the region." I just nodded. It wasn't my problem anymore, though. I felt a pang of guilt for the team I was leaving behind. By noon, Ashley arrived, breezing past my office without acknowledgement. An hour later, I heard furniture being moved. Peering down the hallway, I saw maintenance staff carrying my desk out, while Ashley directed an interior decorator about new paint colors and furniture placement. She was literally erasing my presence before I had even left the building. The staff watched this display with poorly concealed dismay. Many had been with the company for years and had thrived under my leadership style. Ashley's first mandate, issued via company-wide email while I was still clearing out my office, announced a new, casual, creative culture with flexible hours based on inspiration rather than rigid schedules. It sounded progressive, but ignored the reality that our B2B clients expected consistent availability and structured delivery timelines. By 3:00 p.m., my office was empty except for company property. I turned in my keycard and company credit card to HR, who processed my final paperwork with sad smiles and whispered good wishes. As I walked through the creative department one last time, several team members stood up, a silent show of respect that nearly broke my composure. I nodded my thanks and continued to the elevator. Outside, I took one last look at the building where I had spent countless hours building something I believed would someday be mine. Then I drove home, turned off my phone, and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. This wasn't the celebration I had imagined, but it marked a significant turning point nonetheless. The emotional facade I had maintained all day crumbled once I was alone. I alternated between crying and staring blankly at the wall, processing the end of what I had thought would be my lifelong career path. It wasn't just a job I was leaving, it was a future I had envisioned since childhood. Within 2 days, my phone was flooded with messages. Competitors who had tried to recruit me for years sensed an opportunity. Brewer and Associates offered a creative director position with a 30% salary increase. Meridian Marketing proposed creating a new chief client officer role tailored to my strengths. Even Apex Strategies, a national firm, reached out about opening a regional office under my leadership. I responded politely to all of them, but wasn't ready to commit. For the first time since college, I had no clear next step. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. What weighed heaviest was concern for the client relationships I'd nurtured for years. These weren't just business connections, they were people I genuinely cared about. I had guided some through company rebrands, others through leadership transitions, and a few through public relations crises. I knew their children's names, their professional insecurities, their business aspirations. Walking away from these relationships felt like abandoning friends in need. Nevertheless, I needed space to process my next steps, without the pressure of immediately jumping into a new role. I had savings and a small investment portfolio, enough to take a few months to breathe and reassess. Perhaps this forced exit was the push I needed to consider starting my own agency, something I'd contemplated but never seriously pursued while working for the family business. Meanwhile, I began hearing whispers of trouble at Hayes Strategic Marketing almost immediately. A former colleague texted that Ashley had canceled their monthly strategy structure in favor of creative jam sessions. Another mentioned that the development team was frustrated by constantly shifting priorities. These were concerning but expected growing pains with new leadership. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly the situation would deteriorate, or that my father would come calling for help so soon. 1 week after my resignation, I was still adjusting to unemployment. The novelty of waking without an alarm had worn off, replaced by a strange restlessness. I'd started researching what it would take to launch my own boutique agency, creating spreadsheets, analyzing startup costs, potential client bases, and competitive positioning. The numbers looked promising. My reputation in the industry would likely draw enough initial clients to break even within 6 months. I met Eleanor Vance for coffee that Wednesday. She had been my mentor when I first joined the American Marketing Association regional chapter and had since built a successful consultancy specializing in healthcare marketing. She listened attentively as I explained what had happened with my family's business. "Their loss is the market's gain," she said when I finished. "Actually, I've been considering bringing on a partner to expand into new sectors. Your B2B expertise would complement my healthcare focus perfectly. We could double our service offerings overnight." The offer was tempting. Eleanor was respected throughout the industry, and a partnership would provide immediate infrastructure and credibility. We agreed to meet again the following week to discuss specifics. As I drove home, my phone rang with a call from Marcus Vega, a graphic designer who still worked at Hayes Strategic. I answered, curious about what prompted the call. "Madison, it's chaos here," he said without preamble. "Ashley fired the accounting firm yesterday because they questioned some of her spending decisions, and she's talking about completely overhauling our strategic methodology." "I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this." "Because Sterling is about to walk," he replied bluntly. "Ashley insisted on handling their quarterly review herself yesterday, and it was a disaster. Mark asked where you were, and she said the company was moving in an exciting new direction that didn't include outdated strategies." I winced. Mark Sterling valued stability and methodical approaches above all else. Describing established processes as outdated would immediately set off alarm bells for him. She presented a completely new campaign concept without any of the data backing we always provide, Marcus continued. When Mark questioned the shift, she said something about intuitive marketing being the future and dismissed his concerns. Over the next 2 days, more reports filtered in. Ashley had rearranged the office into an open, creative space, removing the private meeting rooms clients used for confidential discussions. She'd implemented a new project management system without training, causing missed deadlines and confusion. Most alarmingly, she'd begun reaching out to fashion and lifestyle brands markets, where Hayes Strategic had no established expertise while neglecting current client relationships. Friday morning, Kevin Grant called me directly. "It happened," he said grimly. "Mark Sterling came in for what was supposed to be a routine signing of the next fiscal year contract. Ashley insisted on presenting her new vision for their account, which included scrapping the strategic alignment process entirely in favor of what she's calling intuitive engagement dynamics." "That's not even a real methodology," I replied, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Exactly. When Mark asked for case studies or results metrics, she couldn't provide any. Then she made it worse by suggesting that Sterling Commerce's current marketing approach was behind the times, and that their brand needed a youthful refresh. For a commercial real estate development firm focused on industrial properties and medical facilities, I could picture Mark's expression, exactly the slight narrowing of his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. He didn't suffer fools gladly, especially those who hadn't bothered to understand his business. Mark stood up, thanked her for her time, and said they would not be renewing their contract. Kevin continued. $8 million. Gone. Lauren tried to backpedal, but he just handed her his card and said, "If Madison ever returns, have her call me." The fallout was immediate and severe. Sterling Commerce had been the cornerstone client for Hayes Strategic for 15 years, accounting for over half of the company's annual revenue. Their departure left a financial crater that couldn't be easily filled. Ashley, by all accounts, had a complete meltdown in the office after Mark left. She blamed the account team for not preparing her adequately, the creative department for stale concepts, and even the reception staff for not creating a welcoming environment for important clients, everyone except herself. By Monday, 3 more significant clients had requested meetings to discuss the direction of their accounts, corporate speak, for reconsidering their relationships. The staff started updating resumes and LinkedIn profiles, sensing the company's instability. 2 senior account managers had already accepted positions elsewhere, creating further gaps in client service. My father had remained surprisingly silent throughout this implosion, but my mother called daily, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails about families supporting each other and getting past differences. I didn't return the calls. This wasn't a petty disagreement. This was the natural consequence of putting unqualified leadership in charge of a complex business. I received one more call that afternoon from Jessica Chen, who had just resigned from her position as account executive. "Ashley called an all-hands meeting today," she reported. She announced that the loss of Sterling was actually strategic pruning to make room for more forward-thinking clients. Then she blamed the negative company culture you created for the current challenges. I laughed despite myself. "And how did that go over?" "3 more people quit on the spot," Jessica replied. "Including Kevin, the company's imploding. Madison. I thought you should know." I thanked her for the update and hung up, feeling a complicated mix of vindication and sadness. I had invested too many years in building Hayes Strategic to enjoy watching its destruction, even if that destruction validated my value. What troubled me most was the impact on dedicated employees who were suffering the consequences of my family's poor decision-making. Still, I had made my choice to walk away, and I intended to stick with it. Eleanor and I were meeting tomorrow to discuss partnership terms, and I was beginning to envision a new professional identity separate from the Hayes name. Then my father called. The first text came at 8:47 p.m. "Madison, we need to talk. It's important." I didn't respond. At 9:22 p.m. "Please call me back. This affects the livelihoods of many people who care about you." At 10:15 p.m. "I know you're upset, but this is bigger than family disagreements. The company is in serious trouble." By 11 p.m., I was in bed reading when my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? I kept my voice neutral. Madison? My father's voice sounded different. Strained, humbled. I wouldn't call if it wasn't absolutely necessary. I waited silently for him to continue. We've lost sterling commerce. The admission seemed physically painful for him to make. I know. A pause. Of course you do. He sighed heavily. What you may not know is that Bradshaw Industries and Clearwater Solutions are also threatening to leave. We might lose everything, Madison. The company, the building, the staff positions. Everything I built. Everything we built together. What does Ashley think about all this? I couldn't help the edge that crept into my voice. He hesitated. She's not handling it well. She wasn't prepared for this level of responsibility. No kidding. I'm calling to ask. He paused again, and I could hear the cost of his pride in the silence. I'm calling to ask for your help. My help, I repeated flatly. You mean the help of someone who was just doing her job? The help of someone who wasn't worth even a small ownership stake in the company she helped build? I made a mistake, he said quietly. We made a terrible mistake. The admission, while satisfying, didn't erase the hurt. What exactly are you asking me to do, Dad? Come back. Help us stabilize the situation. We can discuss terms, significant ownership, whatever you need. Just don't let the company collapse. There are 38 families depending on those jobs. It was a masterful appeal, focusing on the employees rather than himself or Ashley. He knew I cared deeply about the team I'd helped build. I'll think about it, I said finally. That's all I can promise right now. Thank you, he replied, sounding genuinely relieved. That's more than I deserve. I hung up and stared at the ceiling, thoughts racing. Part of me wanted to let them suffer the consequences of their actions. Another part recognized that innocent employees were caught in the crossfire. And a small, ambitious voice whispered that this crisis represented leverage I could use to finally claim what I deserved. The next morning, my mother called. Unlike my father's humbled approach, she alternated between apology and emotional manipulation. We're so sorry for not recognizing your contributions. She began sounding sincere, then pivoted. But families need to stick together during hard times. Your sister is absolutely devastated. She cried all night. When that didn't elicit the sympathetic response she wanted, she tried another angle. Your father hasn't slept in days. His blood pressure is through the roof. I'm worried about his health if this continues. Finally, she got to the real purpose of her call. Your father mentioned offering you ownership. He's thinking 20% would be generous considering the circumstances. The circumstances being that Ashley ran the company into the ground in less than 2 weeks, I replied coolly. Madison, she's trying her best. No one could have predicted Sterling would react so strongly. Actually, I predicted exactly that. I told you both that Sterling worked with us because of relationships and proven methodology, neither of which Ashley bothered to understand before dismantling them. There was a pause before my mother spoke again, her voice smaller. What would it take to bring you back? I don't know that I want to come back, I answered honestly. I'm exploring other opportunities that don't involve family complications. Please just think about it, she pleaded. Your father is prepared to be very generous. After hanging up, I called Jenna Morales, my closest friend since college, and the one person I trusted to give unbiased advice. We met for lunch at a quiet cafe away from the business district. So let me get this straight, Jenna said after I explained the situation. They handed the company to your inexperienced sister, essentially telling you that a decade of your life meant nothing. She predictably tanked their biggest client relationship within days, and now they want you to come save them, offering a minority stake as your reward. That about sums it up. And you're actually considering it. She looked incredulous. I pushed my salad around the plate. There are people who've worked with me for years whose jobs are at risk. They didn't ask for any of this. Noble but not your responsibility, Jenna countered. Your parents created this mess. Maybe this is the universe delivering some karmic justice. Maybe, I conceded. But there's also a practical consideration. If Hayes Strategic collapses, it affects my professional reputation too. Like it or not, my name is literally on the company. Jenna studied me for a moment. You're thinking about going back, but not on their terms. You want to use this crisis to take control. As always, she saw right through me. Is that ruthless? It's business, she replied simply. They made a business decision that backfired spectacularly. Now you have the opportunity to make a business decision of your own. Just be clear about what you really want before you enter negotiations. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a legal pad outlining what I would need to return to Hayes Strategic Marketing. Not what my parents might offer, what I would demand. As I wrote, I realized this wasn't just about ownership percentages or titles. This was about respect recognition and establishing the right power dynamics going forward. I also realized I needed to assess the situation directly before committing to anything. First thing the next morning, I made a call to Mark Sterling. Mark Sterling's executive assistant put me through immediately when I called a courtesy not extended to many. Madison Hayes. Mark's gruff voice carried a hint of warmth unusual for the demanding executive. I wondered when I'd hear from you. I understand there was a situation with Hayes Strategic, I said, keeping my tone professional. Situation? Is that what we're calling it? He chuckled without humor. Your sister insulted our brand, dismissed our concerns, and presented a strategy that demonstrated zero understanding of our business model. That's not a situation. That's incompetence. I winced, but couldn't argue with his assessment. I'm no longer with the company, as you know. So I gathered. Shame. You're the only reason we stayed with a mid-sized agency all these years instead of going with one of the nationals. He paused. Are you calling to tell me where you've landed? I'd consider following you. This was the opening I needed. Actually, I'm exploring options. One possibility involves returning to Hayes Strategic in a leadership capacity. If that were to happen, would you reconsider your decision to leave? Depends, he said bluntly. Would you have actual authority, or would you be window dressing while your sister continues making decisions? I wouldn't return without controlling interest and full decision-making authority. Get that in writing and we can talk, Mark replied. But understand this, we're already in discussions with other agencies. I can't keep our marketing needs on hold indefinitely. I appreciate your candor. I'll be in touch soon with an update either way. After hanging up, I called Eleanor to explain the situation. While disappointed about potentially postponing our partnership, she understood the complexities. Family businesses have layers that outsiders can never fully appreciate, she said wisely. If you do go back, make sure it's on your terms, and know that my door remains open. With Mark's conditional interest confirmed, and Eleanor's support, I texted my father. I'm willing to discuss terms. Meeting tomorrow, 10:00 a.m. at Westwood Coffee. Just you, Mom, Ashley, and me. No lawyers yet. That comes after we agree on principles. He responded immediately. We'll be there, thank you. I spent the evening preparing as I would for any high-stakes negotiation, identifying my non-negotiables, anticipated objections, and walkaway point. This wasn't just a business discussion, it was a redefinition of family dynamics. Both aspects needed careful handling. The next day, I arrived at Westwood Coffee, 15 minutes early, selecting a quiet corner table with some privacy. I ordered a black coffee and reviewed my notes one last time. At precisely 10:00 a.m., my family entered, father looking haggard, mother anxious, and Ashley sullen. Thank you for meeting with us, Dad began once they were seated. Let's be clear about something, I interrupted gently but firmly. I'm not doing this as a favor. This is a business discussion about whether my return to Hayes Strategic makes sense for all parties. Ashley scoffed. Always so dramatic. Ashley, Mom chided quietly. I continued as if there had been no interruption. Before we discuss specifics, I need to understand where things stand currently. Dad, what's the financial situation? He hesitated, then provided a grim assessment. Beyond Sterling's departure, 2 medium-sized clients had already left, and 3 more had paused projects pending a review of their agency relationship. The company was projecting a 70% revenue drop within 60 days if nothing changed. "We can weather it for maybe 3 months before layoffs become necessary," he concluded. I nodded, then turned to Ashley. "And what's your perspective on the situation?" She shifted uncomfortably. "The transition has been challenging. The team hasn't fully embraced my vision, and some clients are resistant to change. With more time." "Time is exactly what the company doesn't have," I cut in. "Sterling represented over half our annual revenue. Their departure alone creates an immediate financial crisis." "So you're enjoying this," Ashley snapped. "Seeing everything fall apart so you can swoop in and play savior." "Ashley?" Mom looked mortified. I kept my composure. "Actually, I've been fielding calls from distressed former colleagues who are updating their resumes. There's no satisfaction in that." Turning back to my father, I continued. "Here are my terms for returning. First, I require 51% controlling ownership of the company." 51%. Dad looked shocked, despite expecting a high demand. "That's non-negotiable," I finished for him. "I'm not coming back to fix this mess only to have my decisions overruled later." "What about me?" Ashley interjected. "You expect me to just step aside?" "My second condition addresses that," I continued calmly. "Ashley will transition to a non-executive role focusing on community relations and special projects retaining 15% ownership." Before she could protest further, I added, "This leverages your social connections and communication skills without involving you in day-to-day operations you're not experienced to handle." "And us?" my mother asked quietly. "You and Dad would retain 34% collectively, but remove yourselves from operational involvement. You'd have board positions and regular updates, but no direct management authority." Dad's face flushed slightly. "So we'd be pushed out of our own company." "The company you were willing to hand over entirely to Ashley despite her lack of qualifications," I reminded him. "I'm offering you continued ownership and input, just not control." "And if we refuse," Ashley challenged. "Then I wish you the best of luck," I replied evenly. "I already have a partnership offer from Eleanor Vance's firm. I'll take it and move forward. Hayes Strategic will likely need to downsize significantly or possibly close within 6 months based on the current trajectory." The table fell silent. My father stared into his untouched coffee. "There's one more condition," I added. "We establish a formal board structure with 2 outside advisors, industry professionals with no family connection. Major decisions would require board approval, creating checks and balances for everyone, including me." "You've thought this through," Dad finally said. "Yes, because unlike the decision to hand the company to Ashley, this one is based on business logic rather than family sentiment." The barb landed as intended. Dad winced visibly. "I need time to think," he said after a moment. "Sterling won't wait long," I reminded him. "Neither will other clients or employees who are already fielding offers elsewhere." Ashley, who had been silently fuming, suddenly erupted. "This is extortion. You're using this crisis to steal the company." "Ashley," I sighed, "the company is already in freefall because of decisions made by you and our parents. I'm offering a solution that preserves jobs, client relationships, and yes, family ownership, albeit restructured. The alternative isn't me walking away empty-handed. It's potentially watching Hayes Strategic cease to exist while I build a successful career elsewhere." My bluntness silenced her momentarily. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes welled with tears. "I never wanted any of this," she admitted quietly. "I thought owning a successful company would be easier, that I could delegate the hard parts and focus on the creative vision. I didn't understand what you actually did all these years." It was the first genuine moment we'd shared in weeks. I softened slightly. "Marketing strategy isn't something you learn overnight. It took me years, even with my education and aptitude for it." Dad cleared his throat. "If, and I stress, if we were to accept these terms, how quickly could you stabilize the situation?" I'd start immediately. First priority would be calling Sterling and other wavering clients personally. With Mark at least, I believe I can salvage the relationship. Staff retention would be next, promising stability and a return to the processes they understand. Within 30 days, we should know if we've stopped the bleeding. My mother, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke up. And family relationships. How do we heal those? It was the question I'd been dreading. That's separate from business terms, I replied carefully. It will take time and new patterns of respect on all sides. I'm willing to try if you are. After another moment of silence, my father nodded slowly. We'll agree to your terms in principle. Have your lawyer draft the necessary paperwork, and we'll review it with ours. 1 week, I specified. We finalize within 1 week, or I move on to other opportunities. Understood, he replied, looking older than I'd ever seen him. As we prepared to leave, Ashley touched my arm lightly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I thought I was taking an opportunity, not taking something from you. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the harm done, but it was a start. I nodded in acceptance, if not full forgiveness. Community relations actually does sound more my speed, she added with a weak smile, especially if it means never having to look at another spreadsheet. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension between us ease slightly. There was a long road ahead to rebuild both the business and our family ties, but at least we had taken the first step. 1 year later, I stood in my office, the same physical space I had cleared out in anger, but now redesigned to my preferences, reviewing quarterly performance reports with a sense of satisfaction. The journey back had been neither easy nor straightforward, but the results spoke for themselves. Within 48 hours of signing the ownership agreement, I had personally called Mark Sterling. After a frank conversation about what had transpired and my vision for the company's future, he agreed to reinstate Sterling Commerce as a client, albeit with a 3-month probationary period. That probation had ended successfully, and we had since expanded their contract to $10 million annually, with the addition of their Asian market expansion. Bradshaw Industries and Clearwater Solutions had similarly returned once they understood I was back in leadership. Of the 5 clients who had left during Ashley's brief tenure, we managed to recover 3, a significant victory considering how difficult it typically is to win back lost business. The staff stabilized almost immediately. Kevin Grant returned as marketing director after I personally recruited him back with an enhanced compensation package. Several others who had been on the verge of leaving chose to stay, citing my return as their primary reason. We lost some talent permanently, but the core team remained intact. My first structural change was implementing a professional management system with clear reporting lines, accountability metrics, and performance reviews. No more decisions based on family dynamics or personal preferences. Everything now had business logic behind it. Ashley surprisingly thrived in her new role as Director of Community Relations. She established a corporate social responsibility program that garnered positive press and strengthened our local business connections. Her natural networking abilities and genuine enthusiasm made her perfect for representing the company at charity events and industry functions. For the first time in our adult lives, we were collaborating rather than competing, each playing to our strengths. The formal board structure proved invaluable. We recruited Janet Blackwell, former CMO of a Fortune 500 company, and Richard Delgado, a respected business consultant, as our independent directors. Their outside perspective frequently challenged our thinking and prevented any regression into old family patterns during board meetings. My relationship with my parents evolved slowly. Initially, interactions were strictly professional, limited to quarterly board meetings and necessary business discussions. The hurt ran too deep for immediate reconciliation. But gradually, as they witnessed the company's recovery and growth under my leadership, a new respect developed. 6 months in, Dad asked if we could resume our tradition of monthly dinners, just the 2 of us, no business talk allowed. During our second dinner, after the awkwardness had somewhat dissipated, he made the closest thing to a complete apology I'd ever heard from him. I grew up in a different era, he said, studying his water glass. When your grandfather handed his small plumbing supply business to my brother instead of me, I accepted it without question, even though I had worked there since high school, and Uncle David had never shown interest. That's just how things were done. He looked up at me. I perpetuated that thinking without examining it. In doing so, I nearly destroyed everything I built and deeply hurt my most capable child. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. But I want you to know that I recognize the injustice now, and I'm proud of the leader you've become, despite my failures. That conversation marked a turning point in our healing process. Mom took longer to fully understand the depth of the wound their decision had caused, but she too eventually acknowledged her role in enabling the situation. By the 1-year mark, Hayes' strategic marketing had not only stabilized, but grown. We expanded our client roster by 15%, focusing on industries where our technical expertise created a clear competitive advantage. Our proprietary strategic alignment process, which Ashley had tried to discard, was now formally documented and protected as intellectual property, becoming our primary market differentiator. Most importantly, we established a formal succession plan with clear criteria for future leadership based on merit experience and demonstrated capability, not family position. This plan was approved by the full board and communicated to all employees, creating transparency about how future transitions would be handled. The crisis that had nearly destroyed both company and family ultimately forced a necessary restructuring of both. I had transformed from a people-pleasing executive seeking parental approval into a confident leader who understood her value and insisted others recognize it too. Ashley had found a role that utilized her strengths without forcing her into a position she was ill-equipped to handle. Our parents had confronted their outdated thinking and begun the process of making amends. Was it perfect? Family businesses never are. There were still occasional tensions, disagreements about direction, and moments when old hurts resurfaced. But the fundamental dynamic had shifted from entitlement to earned authority, from assumed roles to demonstrated capability. The greatest lesson I learned through this ordeal wasn't about marketing strategy or business management. It was about personal worth. By walking away from something I had helped build, I paradoxically gained the leverage to claim what should have been mine all along. Sometimes you must be willing to lose everything to gain what you truly deserve. This realization has transformed how I approach both professional and personal relationships. I no longer accept less than I'm worth, or apologize for demanding appropriate recognition. The experience of being undervalued by those closest to me created a determination never to undervalue myself again. As I look toward the future, I'm building something stronger and more enduring than what was lost, a company based on merit rather than obligation, relationships founded on respect rather than expectation, and a personal identity grounded in confidence rather than approval seeking. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for your worth in a family or work situation? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their value isn't determined by others' recognition. Thanks for watching, and remember, knowing your worth is the first step to receiving it.